So, guys, what's one thing you wish you learned when you were in school? JD, why don't you tell us first?
Man, so many tough choices here. I think I wish to learn more about finances. What about you, Nadia?
I kind of wish that I learned more about like amniotic membranes. Like I don't really know that much about them.
Wait, so you're saying you've never heard of adnexal ocular, Nadia?
No, what's that?
No, JD, tell her.
It's a placental-derived dehydrated amniotic membrane used to treat some ocular surface diseases. What kind of diseases do you think it kind of treats, Doug?
All right. I mean, one of the most common. Let's first start with dry eye. And then you have recurrent corneal erosion, even pterygiums, a whole bunch of other things, but that's just to name a few.
No, wait, that sounds so cool. Like, where can I get more information about Adnexa?
Adnexaocular.com. Check it out.
I'm on my way. I'm going to type it in right now.
Welcome to the Depth Perception Podcast.
We go in depth about the perceptions and misconceptions of optometry,
which includes the business of optometry,
social issues within optometry,
and life as an optometry student.
Coming straight from Dr. Jasdeep Singh Soni,
Dr. Nadia Afghami,
Dr. Douglas Akiti,
and Svetlana Nunez. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Harbir's in Japan. How is he even going to make it to the podcast?
yeah. I'm like still on my. If you go to my story, I think there's still my last story from Japan still on there. So I certainly was there in the last 24 hours.
We love it. Let's start picking your brain. So the reason we wanted to have you on is because essentially we kind of all look at you as someone who's like ahead of us and someone who's done things that we haven't had the experiences to do yet. And we wanted to pick your brain like, hey, 10 years from now, or if you go back in time and you could advise yourself as we're kind of in that position where, we're graduating in the last 5 years or we're graduating, just wanted to pick your brain when it comes to, personal life, professional life, finances, whatever it may be, and just kind of see maybe there's some things that you see that you can advise us on as we go forward too.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that idea. I love the topic. There's certainly things that I think of regularly now. And when I get the opportunity to speak to recent grads or students, that come up kind of consistently. So I'll be happy to share some of that. You're just going to have to keep me on track. That's the one thing I can tell you ahead of time.
We got you.
And
what comes to your head? Go ahead, SV.
Oh, I was just going to say, before we start too, would you like to introduce yourself, tell the listeners a little bit about you, where you're practicing, what you do in optometry?
For sure, yeah. My name's Harbir Sian. I am co-owner in a couple of different practices in the Vancouver area in Canada. I always like to kind of say that you mentioned that there's a distinction here. The two different practices are in two different settings. So one is a sublease practice next door to a lens crafters, which we've had for about 10 years now. And the other one is a private practice, independent private practice, which is about 6 years in now. So definitely got different perspectives on, and both are cold starts. Even the lens crafters was a brand new store, just a new build when we opened it. So starting from scratch there, and the private practice, we built that out from, an empty space into our practice, what it is now. So I've had the chance to kind of see the industry from those two different perspectives. I like to, like to speak and lecture and present and stuff like that. I like to be, you guys know, I like to be in the thick of it and attend conferences and stuff all the time. I like to be involved in the industry. So even back home, being involved with our association and stuff like that behind the scenes is something that I like to do. So I just kind of like to just be in all of it. I'm definitely not the type of person who, not to say there's anything wrong with it, but I'm not the type of person who wants to just practice 9 to 5, see patients, go home and kind of, it's not just a job for me. It's like a big experience. My whole life kind of revolves around it.
How did you get started in like the outside of practice kind of things, what motivated you? Because like we have people like you guys to look up to, but you guys are kind of pioneers in this kind of part of the industry. So what kind of avenues did you feel like motivated you to start to be in the thick of things for the most part?
What's really weird is when I was applying, I'm going to rewind the clock even further. I'm not going to say how many years, but when I was applying to optometry school, You know, I don't know what the process was when you guys were applying, but you got to kind of like write an essay or some long form answer type questions and stuff. And I applied to 3 schools, and on all 3 applications, I kind of, it's different for you guys. You guys just do one application that goes to everybody now, right? Is that how it is?
Yeah.
So for us, we had to do a
Like a
separate
portal.
application for each school.
Yeah.
And so I applied to 3 schools, and on all of them, I wrote the same thing. Like, what I just kind of said to you guys, I don't want to just practice. I want to be, the specific term I use is I wanted to be an ambassador for the profession. So I'm not sure why, as like an undergrad student, I thought that, you know, as I was applying. I know for a fact I wasn't just BSing. I actually felt it, but I didn't know what it meant to do that, to be that. I didn't know what it meant to, what it's going to look like or anything like that. So I had something from the early, before even going to optometry school kind of days. I don't think I thought about it that much in optometry school, but right at the end of optometry school, in my 4th year, on my very last clinical externship rotation, something big happened here in BC, which is that there was a huge deregulation in eye care. So basically at that point in the year 2010, the BC, our government here in British Columbia, decided to deregulate all eyewear and all eyewear sales. So glasses, contact lenses, you could go online and purchase without a valid prescription. Nobody needs to validate it. So that happened 14 years ago, right at the end of my education, right before I started practicing. And so there, all of a sudden was like this very specific moment in time where I was like, okay, what can I do about this? Because one option was like, oh no, the sky's falling and I can't do anything about it. The other option was I could be really angry about it, which I was, and that pushed me into like starting to write blogs, and I'd write angry like articles and things like that. Then I realized it's, rather than being angry, let me try to educate. So I turned those blogs more into like, well, let me try to make eye care fun and more approachable for the average person. So I started writing weekly blogs and emails, like started an email thread or chain or whatever back then. And that turned slowly into me doing like YouTube videos over the next few years. And then social media kind of started to kick up a bit more. So more Instagram, and then the podcast. That's sort of the trajectory of that online stuff. But it, nothing is in like a vacuum. Everything kind of happens at the same time, all sort of blended together. So sometimes it's hard to tease it out. But I was doing that. I was writing those articles, and because of one of those blogs, it was about a hockey player, or the Vancouver Canucks here. They're big, our local sports hockey team, NHL team. Everybody, really follows them closely. And one of the guys took a puck to the eye and got a lot of damage in his eye, massive retinal detachment. He actually lost most of the vision in that eye, and lots of stuff going on. So it was a big deal because we were making a push to the playoffs, potentially Stanley Cup finals. And I'd written a blog about what could possibly be wrong with Manny Malhotra's eye, just from an optometrist perspective, taking a puck to the eye. Here's all the stuff that could happen. And somebody from the local news called me and says, well, you seem to be an expert on this, and the Canucks are a big deal right now, so we want you on to talk about it. So this was me, like not even 6 months out of school, right? So I was like, I got that, and I got a little taste of it, and I was like, well, I want more of that. Like, I want to be on TV, or I want to be like present in more spaces. And so that kind of like pushed me more to do it. And then I would see colleagues, kind of like how you were seeing me maybe speaking on a stage somewhere. I would see a colleague do that and say, okay, what does it take to be there on that stage, or to speak for Alcon or for BNL or whoever? And so I would ask questions, and I would ask, the reps, if I went to a contact lens dinner, like, what would it take for me to speak for you? At this time, not a clinic owner or anything like that, just, new grad. And I would keep asking them. And I think they saw the energy, and I was taking the initiative to reach out to them and that kind of thing. And they kind of wrote it down, took note of that. And so when the time kind of came a couple of years down the road, they would tap me on the shoulder and be like, hey, we need you to speak to opticians. Okay, now we see that you're, comfortable speaking to a group of people. Now maybe let's get you to speak to some optometrists and go from there and there. So there's a lot of stuff happening at the same time. I'm happy to kind of try to tease out more of it, but I was going to say the main thing was, before going into optometry school, I already had that kind of feeling I wanted to do more. And then coming out of optometry, there was that one very specific moment where everything just kind of went to, I'm trying to be careful on words here. Everything kind of hit the fan, and we had to, adapt. And so that kind of pushed me in a certain direction as well.
So very interesting. And you mentioned the fact that, you know, during your application process, you initially had this mindset and thought of being an ambassador. But I want to ask you, even before then, like what made you think that? Like, did you wear glasses? I've never seen you wear glasses before. So what was your motivation even to getting to optometry school?
Yeah. That story is not that interesting, so I don't really tell it very often. No, I don't wear glasses. Knock on wood, emmetrope now, almost presbyope, emerging presbyope here. Try to slowly come to terms with this. I'm wearing anti-fatigue lenses these days. It really was more of like a calculated decision for me. So I was coming to, I don't know what year in undergrad, and I was like, okay, I got to start to figure out. I actually was not a very good student. And in undergrad, I was like just barely getting by, 2 point something, low twos GPA, just sort of coasting. And then I was like, well, then what am I going to do? And I remember specifically one of the advisors was kind of like, you're not going to get into any schools after this, given like what we're seeing on this transcript.
Wow.
And I took that as like a bit of a challenge, like I'm going to show you. But also then I asked myself, I'm like, what am I going to show her exactly right after? What is the plan here? So I wanted to do something in the medical field, but I didn't know what. Pharmacy, physio, dentist, optometrist. I don't know what. First of all, if I got straight A's from this point forward, what would my GPA be, and what school would I actually be able to get into? I have to be realistic about that. And what do I actually want to do? So I started to volunteer a little bit at different places, and optometry was the setting where I felt the most comfortable. The optometrists were chill, more like my personality, not so type A. And they seemed comfortable. They were happy with work, and they seemed to be happy at home, and they were making enough money to make a living and support their family and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of checked all the boxes for the most part. But then ultimately sitting in the exam room with one particular optometrist, I really loved his demeanor and how he chatted with patients. And to me, it felt like it was like they were just having a conversation, and in the process, an eye exam was happening. And I really love that. And he was telling stories, and he was relating like art and music, in different patients, he would make a comment about music, and another patient would talk about art and something else, and I was like, this is so cool. Like, he's well-versed and easy to speak to. And he was really supportive of me. So he was, when I was in the exam room with him, was kind of like, that's when it all kind of came together and clicked for me. And so I made kind of a mission to get my GPA up, and high enough, maybe just high enough that I could apply to optometry school. And I was counting on the rest of my resume to be well-rounded enough that it would kind of bring me in. But it wasn't because I had any kind of like really emotional story about my eyes or somebody else in my family's eyes. It was really a calculated, like, this fits what I see myself doing in the future. Here's what I can get into. Seems like something I'd enjoy doing. That was it.
Still makes sense. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I have a question. I guess we can go into the topic of like speaking and being a speaker first, just because I think the first time that I saw you on social media was when you posted a video about you doing a TED Talk. And my first impression was, this is an optometrist on a TED Talk. Wow. And I was like, I didn't know optometrists could do that. And that's when I was already applying, I think, like starting an optometry Instagram. And I was like, who is this? And then meeting you for the first time at Transitions Academy. This is the TED Talk guy. So that's how I knew you from the beginning. So would you say, I know you said you wanted to always be an ambassador. Did you always have the confidence to go on stage and speak, or was it something that you've built maybe through school or through any other experiences in life?
Yeah. I'm very fortunate that I've had experiences throughout my schooling and whatever that have given me exposure to things that I think maybe not everybody has had exposure to. And it's not because I was necessarily out there trying to do it, but like things that just sort of came by or came to me, you know, that I was able to do. So for example, specific to speaking, in undergrad, I actually was part of a club in the university. That was it's called the Punjabi Student Association. So I'm Punjabi, JD, you know, speak Punjabi at home, right? That's our language, from India. And so there was an association that was like specifically for Punjabi students. I speak English 99% of the time, but you know, my family's Punjabi. But so I joined it because, and to be honest with you, I would have totally ignored that club if it wasn't for the fact that my older cousin, who had been at that university a few years before me, was part of that club. And he had made some really good friends, and there was an overlap with some of the people who were there when he was there, and they were still there when I was there. And so they're like, oh, you're his cousin? Oh, great. You got to come hang out, and let's introduce you to this, and let's bring you in this. And so I started to kind of go to so as part of that, like first I was just hanging around to see what they do. I got more involved. Eventually I became the president of the club. And what we were doing was cultural activities, right? We actually would put on a show in a theater and pack it 12 or 1,300 people, and you know, bring in a group to do a dance performance, bring in a group to do like some other kind of performance. We ourselves, me and kind of the core group of people in the club, would do live comedy sketches. We would write them ourselves, act them out on stage. We would make a 30-minute roughly video movie, like a short film, every year for this show. Like, it was kind of crazy the amount of dedication that was actually involved. And it sort of came to me by accident, right? But I loved it, so I got more involved. So in that, I got really comfortable being on stage in front of large groups of people, speaking, acting. And I got kind of handy with filming and editing as well, right? And back then, the filming and editing process was very, very arduous and challenging, and not easy. These days, everything's done on the phone. I can do more on my cell phone than I was able to do with a camcorder and like a big PC and like all the editing software back then. I can do like all of that in 5 minutes on my phone with an app. Like, it's just crazy how much things have changed. But having that exposure back then, it got me kind of comfortable with doing a lot of that stuff now.
That's great. I think we're seeing the stepping stones, right, to where you are. You know, you have the passion to be an ambassador. You see your experiences in college. You see your passion, which led to you having an opportunity to be on TV, which is now like manifesting here. Is there anything you would tell yourself 10 years ago or in the past, maybe when starting out, like, hey, how you would, if you could give yourself some advice in the past, like how to continue or go forward, or any thoughts on that?
There's a lot of stuff, but along the lines of what you were just saying, like, you're starting to see the stepping stones as I'm kind of talking through it with you. You're seeing that I had this experience and that, and some of it was just by chance, some of it was my effort that I put in. But there's like all of this stuff that's happened over the years. I didn't just end up on doing a TED Talk just because, or I didn't end up doing a lecture at a certain conference or something just because. And I think earlier stages, and even today, I'll be honest with you, I'll see somebody who's doing something. I was like, wow, how do they get there? You know, and I don't know how to fill that gap, or, you know, what are the steps to get there? And that, a lot of it is just like having the faith of just doing the work, and slowly, like, there's stuff that I get to do now that I was like, holy crap, I couldn't have even imagined doing that 10 years ago, right? It's how cool is it that I get to go here and travel and do this and that. But when you're in the earlier stages, it's easy to look at someone who's doing something and, you know, either assume, well, they were just born with the ability to do this thing, or they were just gifted something and that's how they got there. And the trouble is, some people deliberately make it seem that way too. Like, oh, I'm just good at this. I'm naturally, you know, and maybe some people are more naturally talented speakers than others. But what I've realized is 99%, like, it's a really rare time, it's really rare to see somebody just happens to show up somewhere and has that opportunity. 99% of the time, it's because they put in the work, they did a bunch of stuff behind the scenes. I don't appreciate when people try to make it seem like, oh, I'm just that good, that I'm just here now, right? I think that doesn't help anybody. I would rather you know that I went through all these things and I had all these experiences and I struggled and I didn't actually do that well and I wasn't very good at it before. And then over a matter of 10 years, I got here, right? Because then you understand that it's doable. The problem is that when we, whether you're looking at somebody who's really smart or a good business person or a talented musician or an athlete, and you just chalk it up to they're just talented and end of story, then that gives you an excuse to not do it, right? That gives you an excuse to not put in the work. But when you understand that if I do the work, it'll actually get me somewhere, and sometimes it'll open doors that you don't even realize exist, then it should hopefully encourage you to start to put in that work and get that experience, go out of your way to be in uncomfortable positions and all that kind of thing. So that's something I would tell myself back then, is like, even if someone tells you they're just really good at something and they were just born that way, don't believe them. Most likely they had to do a whole bunch of work behind the scenes. They either just don't want you to get to that level, they're too insecure to share the fact that they had to work for it, whatever it is. They didn't just end up there. So that's something that along those lines that I would really want myself to know 10 years ago.
That's absolutely great insight. And, part of our generation, we just see on social media, like you see the final result.
Yeah.
Like, hey, Harbir on vacation, or hey, Harbir, in business, Harbir on TV, right? But you don't see everything you put in. You don't see the process, all the work that was put in. So that was absolutely great to highlight there.
But to be honest with you, I forget the process myself, So it's only because we're talking about it like, I also did that. I also did that, right? But
Yeah.
For me, I forget too, because you have to kind of go to the next level, and sometimes you have to forget, you just don't dwell on things. But it's important to know that.
Yeah.
What about your businesses? Like, basically what I'm hearing is like, you have to have this certain level of like bravery to be able to be as influential as Mr. Harbir is, but also like when you're venturing out into like getting your private practices and all that going, like, what was the motivation? Like, how did you think you were going to do it? Because as somebody who someday would like to have her own private practice, it's scary, right? Like, like even speaking is less scary than putting it all out there and putting your finances on the line and being like, I don't know where to start. So can you speak a little bit about those things?
For sure. I would agree with you. I would be in the same position as you. I am much less afraid of being on stage in front of tons and tons of people than I am of business. I'm not a very good business person, to be honest with you. I'm not very comfortable with it. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to learn every day something that's going to help me improve some step of the business, right? That's definitely something that right now I'm focusing on more, is like I'll speak to colleagues who I see are doing really, really well in their business. I'll try to figure out, okay, how do we get past this sticking point? How do we bring in new customers, or how do we improve our sales or conversion or whatever, these little metrics that we all have? That's still something that we're working on all the time. With the business, I have a business partner, Dr. Harleen Tekar, who actually, we've been friends since high school. We've known each other for a very long time. And when we were coming out of optometry school, we kind of just, we'd been in touch the whole time. We went to different schools, but we graduated the same year. So we were in touch with each other, kind of like, okay, what are you thinking when you come back to Vancouver? Are you thinking about owning your own business? What do you think about maybe looking into going into partnership together? And so we sort of loosely were looking, and then opportunity came up, and we said, okay, is this something that we could work on together? So we are like yin and yang. We're quite opposite in our personalities. I'm very like chill, I'll get it done when I get it done kind of thing. And she's very like type A, everything's lists and highlights and, collated and all this stuff. Everything's in a binder and pretty and everything like that. And I'm like, oh, where's that piece of paper? I can't remember where I left it. And so obviously sometimes we drive each other crazy in that sense. We butt heads, but also then it brings a bit of a balance to everything, right? Because I think she sees that if she was, type A micromanaging all the time, then that wouldn't work so well. And if I was just as chill as I am all the time, we also wouldn't make that much progress. We're also different in the sense that like, I like to like have a lot of new technology in the office. I'm not to say she doesn't, she does too, but I'm like a kid in a candy store, right? I'm like, I want to buy that thing now, and I want to buy that thing now. And she's more like, okay, well, does it make sense in the finances? Is this the right time? Do we have enough patience of this? You know, the important questions that you should be asking. And so we'll actually sit down and have that conversation. We can make those decisions together. But certainly what I'm getting at is having a business partner, having specifically her as a business partner is invaluable, has been invaluable to me. I don't really know where I would be in my business process if we weren't partners. It definitely has helped me keep things a lot more organized, which I am not. It helps the office run more streamlined, more efficiently, better processes, better systems. She's good at all of that kind of stuff. And I'm a bit more big picture, like, where do we want to go with this? And, you know, how can we grow and different things like that. So to go back to I told you guys right off the top, you have to keep me in check here. You know, kind of the real estate thing about, you know, location, I think still is very, very important for opening a private practice, especially a private practice. Subleases and stuff like that, you can probably be a little bit more flexible on, but you really got to make sure it's the right demographic. You got to make sure there's enough of the types of patients that you want. And then one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about anyways, you know, going back, if I was to go back and talk to myself 10 years ago, it would be like, try to specialize early on. And not like, doesn't mean that you only do one thing. You could be like a total subspecialty and you only do dry eye referrals and stuff like that. It's kind of hard to build that from zero, but you could. But more in kind of I think the better approach is be sort of general optometry, but you have a niche, right? And that way, at least that'll help you build your private practice, your primary care practice, by getting referrals from other people, whether it be GPs or other specialists or even other optometrists. And then as time goes, you can lean more and more into your specialty. But I think having some sort of specialty in your practice is very, very important. And I would say that to anybody, even in a sublease setting, it can be very helpful. In our sublease setting, we do pretty much all the same things we do in our private practice. You know, because we know it's important to have those subspecialties available. So that is kind of the two pieces of advice maybe is location. Try to have a subspecialty of some kind. If you're going to have a business partner, make sure, you know, you guys understand how that relationship works ahead of time, have stuff written down, proper partnership agreement, all that kind of thing. Having a business partner can be super helpful too.
Yeah.
So, like, how long did it take? Did you guys jump into this right after you graduated, or did you work elsewhere first?
We started discussions right away. Like, okay, we're actively looking, but the sublease practice came around in 2013 or so, and the private practice was 2017. And it was 2017 is when we officially stopped working at all other, because up until that time, we were working in our own practice and somewhere else, right, to supplement the income. But once that second practice opened, then we didn't really have the time to go work somewhere else as well. Although once in a while, I might still fill in somewhere in the earlier days of that practice. But for those first 7 years or so after graduation, yeah, we were working in multiple different locations.
So going along with private practice, you mentioned like subspecialties. So do both of you guys have subspecialties, or like how does that work?
So yeah, this is a perfect segue. There's one other thing I wanted to say on that note. So we both kind of practice in similar ways. We both try to have multiple things that we do as like kind of niches or subspecialties that we offer. In the practices, the two main ones are dry eye and myopia management. So that's kind of where our focus is at. So I tried to kind of dive deep into dry eye a few years ago, and it was good. I got a lot of exposure and I got comfortable with a lot of stuff and treatments, and we bought technology that we love, and we're offering pretty advanced treatment options in our practices now. But I realized for me to be like super specialized in dry eye was just too much work for me and not what I actually wanted. But getting the exposure at least let me be specialized enough that I still get referrals from other ODs and I can treat, more advanced dry eye disease because we have the technology and the experience and exposure to it. But what I think is more important is having the comfort level to have some sort of specialty within the practice, and more importantly, being like multi-dimensional as an optometrist, as a practitioner, being comfortable seeing dry eye disease and being able to treat it, seeing myopia and understanding myopia management options, and perhaps implementing those in your practice. Being comfortable maybe doing a little bit of prism or something like that, where instead of just running away from it and being like, oh, I don't really know how to figure that out. I'm definitely by no means anywhere near being a BV expert, but like, I don't freak out if somebody comes in with a BV issue. I try a few things to figure it out. And if I can't, then okay, who am I going to send this to? But patients really appreciate that little bit of effort that you might put in. And often simple things fix most of those BV issues. So, having that sort of multifaceted, multidimensional approach to practicing has been, I think, something that I found really important. And I would certainly tell myself that in the beginning of my career, and I would tell any new grad or any student that now, is like, try to be multidimensional, multifaceted, sort of Swiss Army knife kind of deal, where like whatever's kind of thrown at you, you're good at it. And that can be helpful. Good. You don't have to be great at it. You should be just good at it. But that helps you in a lot of different ways. If you're starting a new private practice and you see there's a certain type of subset of patients in that area that maybe need a certain type of care, you're flexible enough to kind of lean into that. Or if you're an associate, you want to kind of like show off a little bit to the owner of the practice. You can do that because you have the skill set to kind of like, if they bring an opportunity to you, you're like, oh, you're not going to say, oh no, I don't touch dry eye, you can lean into that or whatever it might be. And that might help you grow within that practice. But on a bigger picture kind of thing, if we zoom way out, if more of us are multi-dimensional, multifaceted practitioners, it's better for the profession as a whole, right? So if, in Canada right now, there's sort of a scare that some of these bigger corporate entities are going to force optometry to become very one-dimensional, just basically refraction and sell glasses and that's it. And it's really going to cause the profession to suffer, and the perception that the public has of the profession will suffer. We need to take it upon ourselves to show the public that we are doctors with all these different skills under our belts, and that we can provide these different types of care. Now, things are different in the US, I understand, but and state by state it'll be different. But having that sort of mixed skill set, that toolbox, I think is really helpful as you kind of build your career, and trying to keep those tools sharp, right? Not getting kind of stuck in like, oh, this is just how I practice in this clinic. Trying to keep those tools sharp for whenever you need them.
Harbir, do you ever get imposter syndrome?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you like deal with that? Because I know like a lot of people applying and like practicing, everyone from like all walks of life can relate to feeling that way. So how do you kind of combat that?
I have to think about that, to be honest with you, because I don't know if I definitely can tell you I've felt it, but I can't right off the bat verbalize how I got past it, other than so I can think of something that someone said on my podcast a while back, one of the earlier episodes. He was a professional football player in the CFL, in Canadian Football League, but he was very successful, all-star, won multiple championships and this kind of thing. And he's now like a coach, business coach, life coach kind of guy. And he told a story about like when he was in college playing football, and he was down and not sure if he was good enough and this kind of thing. And to me, imposter syndrome comes when you haven't proven to yourself that you're good enough, right? Or you haven't proven to yourself that you're worthy of doing the thing that you're doing. It's not really about other people and what they think about you, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't feel like an imposter. So proof comes from confidence. Confidence comes from actually doing a thing and getting feedback from it. and getting experience from it. So the only way to get past imposter syndrome is keep doing the thing that you're trying to prove to yourself that you're good at, right? If you do it, even if you don't do well at it the first time, or let's say you did well, you get your feedback. All right, well, that's proof to me now. That's evidence that I am pretty good at this thing. Then you do it again. Now I have more evidence that I'm pretty good at this thing, right? So to me, that's the best way to get past it, is to keep doing the thing that you want to prove that you're good at. And once you've done it enough times, you will have your proof that you're good at it, and you won't feel like an imposter anymore. So that could be talking on stage, it could be running a business, it could be whatever, but you have to do it. You can't sit there and just think about like, what are people thinking? Most of the time people aren't thinking about you anyway, so you might as well just keep doing it.
That's a great concept. Confidence is something that I'm currently working on. I'm reading the book Confidence Gap. And so one of the big principles that you hit on is the feelings of confidence come second, the actions come first. So do it, and then the feelings will come as you keep doing it. So it's great that you essentially just illustrated that. Yep,
that's it. Sitting on the couch is not going to help you feel better about yourself, right? Sitting there just thinking about how you're feeling is not going to help you feel better. Taking an actual action and getting feedback from it is the only way.
Whether it be you going on TV or speaking in Punjabi Student Association or starting a business with a partner or learning to practice, it all comes there.
Yeah. And, going back to the Punjabi Student Association thing, like, I didn't really grow up speaking a lot of Punjabi in our household. My parents would speak to me in Punjabi, but I still, to this day, I speak to my parents in English. So Same. I didn't really have a lot of exposure, unlike some of my family. My wife's family, for example, they speak Punjabi at home. Parents, siblings, so they're really good at it. But in university, I wasn't really that good at Punjabi, but here I am, like, part of this group that puts on shows that are almost entirely in Punjabi. So I have to, like, get comfortable with it, at least speak it to the extent that I'm able to speak it. But it made me more comfortable speaking it as well, right? And understanding, like, the nuances of the language and jokes that you can make. And also kind of an awkward situation, but gave me the confidence to speak the language more freely. And it's been hugely valuable to me, because a lot of my patients are Punjabi, and they come to me specifically because I speak Punjabi, right? So having that, again, has helped me become better in clinic as well. So that came from that, putting myself in a situation to have the experience and learn from it.
Yeah. I have a question, Habir. Do you ever, because like it's in your personality, it's just innate in you to not be like doing the same thing, always doing something new, always involved in different things, do you ever feel like sometimes you get a little overwhelmed by everything that you've signed up for? And how do you go about that? And what would you recommend for, I tend to do this. I sign up for everything, and then suddenly I can't handle what I signed up for. Yeah. So what do you say? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I call that the year 2023. That was my overwhelming year, where I signed up for way too much stuff.
Your phone agrees.
My phone agrees. I felt like what my phone just looked like. So yeah, I actually don't know if I can give you advice on that, because I just put myself through a year of, like, every month I'm traveling to multiple different conferences, away from home, away from the clinic. And I was like, I couldn't, I didn't know what my limit was. I didn't know what my capacity was until I actually hit the limit or went past the limit. And then I was like, oh, okay, this is enough. And thankfully that happened last year, where I said that was too much. What I did in 2023 was amazing. I would never trade it for anything. I'm so grateful that I had all those opportunities. And I know that those opportunities are going to lead to more opportunities later, but I can't have a year like that. So, again, because there was too much going on, and the important things, the priorities that I've set for myself in my life, they were starting to now slide, because I'd made all these other commitments. And those priorities for me are family, and then my practices, and then all the other stuff I do. So what would my advice to you be? I would, if you're like me, and not everybody is, but if you're like me and you're willing to just find out like that, then I would say take every opportunity you can, have every experience that you can, because like I said, a lot of those opportunities may not feel super fruitful today, but they might have some other benefit down the road. Like you made a connection, you know, or somebody got to see you speak. Maybe you did it for free, but they saw that you're great at it. Now they want you to come speak next year and they're going to pay you for it, whatever it might be. But I would say take every opportunity you can, and then you will find your limit. You will find your capacity, what your actual limit is. There's the soft limit where you're like, oh, this is a bit too much and my head's getting a little jumbled. Then there's a limit where you're like, I literally can't do this. Like there's just no way I can do this, right? And you can decide which one of those limits is comfortable for you. So I kind of got to the one where I was like, I just cannot do this. So for me, it was like this year, I'm only going to speak if like I paid a certain amount. Like I'll have to set a new number, and maybe a lot of people won't want to pay me that. And that's okay. That'll be one of my filters for taking opportunities for speaking. But if somebody does pay me, then it's actually kind of worth my time to go and do it. That's one of my filters, but also like reassessing like how much time it's going to take away from work and things like that. So resetting my priorities again and making sure I'm sticking to them this year is really important for me.
That's a great way to kind of look at it, right? Like you said, a filter is priority. So other parties that might be there, as you said, your family, right? Like you also have three children, right? Which is amazing to do that while you're, running a business, while you're speaking, while you're traveling. And, with that comes different financial, challenges too, right? Is there anything about eyecare that you see now that, oh, wow, I'm so glad I went eyecare because I can have someone work in the clinic while I can go back to my family if they need to go babysit, or this allows me to financially make money while there's an asset that's growing? Like, is there anything financial or personal life standpoint that you can appreciate now that maybe you didn't see like 2 years ago?
Yeah. One thing, I gave my business partner a shout out. I have to give my wife a shout out, the biggest shout out, because, having 3 kids and having a family and everything like that and traveling as much as I do, there's no way I'd be able to do it unless she was like not, if she wasn't like a superstar the way she is. So I have to make sure that I say that every time, because otherwise it wouldn't be fair. Like I don't take care of the kids and travel at the same time. I can't possibly do that, right? Or even just go to work on a day-to-day basis. So we have to figure out that dynamic at home, and that's really, really important too. So that's the most important relationship for me by far, is that home relationship. Because if that's stressful, then everything else just sucks. You can't enjoy the opportunities, you can't take advantage of a lot of the opportunities, and you can't explore the boundaries of your own kind of, your career, but your profession in general too. So that's definitely very, very important. Now, financially, so, as the clinics are getting busier and we are able to hire associates and not have to be at work as much, that really does also free up time and opportunity to do other things, which is amazing. One of the things is, depending on your long-term goals, personal life, family life, business, whatever, just work. There's very, very few jobs, careers that just by going to work 9 to 5, that you will become like wealthy or achieve financial freedom and things like that, right? You have to be really good at other stuff too. So like, you're an athlete and you make $10 million a year, well, then you're probably good. Like, as long as your spending habits are kind of, okay. But in most other professions, you're not just going to make money and be wealthy just because you went to work 9 to 5. You have to put that money somewhere. Optometry most likely can't just be your only source of, income stream or only revenue stream. You got to find other ones. And I think that's really, really important. And the earlier you can start doing that, the better. So find whether that might be you're investing and that's becoming sort of an income stream or some, a way of creating wealth on the side, or perhaps you find other things like speaking or other things that may be able to bring a little bit of money in for you. But ultimately, I think just having your job, just 9 to 5, is not enough to, again, it depends on what your goals are, right? So, and it's not to say that one goal is better than the other, but I think if you're trying to think about building wealth and thinking about family, long-term, generational, then it's not going to come from just your 9 to 5. You're going to have to find other ways to build that. And whether that's investing, with, going into real estate or putting your money in places, that's, I think, something that I wish I'd started to think about earlier. Because earlier in my career, I was like, oh, I'm making decent money. I'm spending some, I'm putting some aside, but I kind of wish I was a bit more active on that. Not just putting money aside, but making the money do more, like build. Because the earlier you start doing that, the more impact it's going to have.
In what way? What should I do? Should I buy a second house?
Yes.
Tell me right now. I'm going to write it down.
It can, yeah. I mean, real estate seems to be always generally a safe bet, but there's lots of different ways to look into investing that money, and some are going to be slow long-term growth. Some might be more quick, and obviously be careful of the get rich quick stuff. That can sound very enticing, but you know, if you have to, it's like another job. You have to start learning about it, reading about it, talking to people about it, and then with experience, learning where you might be able to put your money. You know, and sometimes, like everything else, you make a mistake, and you have to learn from that too. But ultimately, the lesson is like, try to actively kind of put your money or do things to make multiple revenue streams, so that it's not just one. You know, just in case something happens to that one, you have other things that you can dabble in or rely on, or, you know, safety nets that you have.
Those are great thoughts to have, and we know we've put you through the ringer here for the past hour, and even your phones get a little tired here. So we
hey man, I know you like talking about money, JD. Why don't you give me some pointers?
I love talking about money. I could go all day, but we didn't want to keep, you know, we want to make sure you get some sleep here. You must have some jet lag. So
I do, but there's no chance I can go to sleep yet. I got to stay awake until like at least 8 p.m.
Can we wrap up on like what one big difference is from Japan to like the US? Just tell us, like, what was the biggest thing that you noticed that was different?
The culture is incredible. They are they're incredibly polite, like to a point that it makes you uncomfortable. Like so polite.
That's saying something.
You have a good day.
Canada.
You have a good day. You have a good day.
Yeah, everybody's like bowing back. Like, I'll give you an example. Now, we were staying at the hotel. It was a nice hotel, so the service is gonna be good anyways. But we got there, we checked in, and now we kind of split up because we had separate rooms. So a couple of guys went ahead, and a couple of guys went later. It was, anyways, when I went into the elevator, this person who was working there, first of all, walked us all the way to the elevator, went in, pressed the button that went to our floor, stood there, waited for us to load our luggage into the elevator, got out, and then waited for the elevator doors to close. But she bowed, and she stayed in the bow until the elevator doors were completely shut. And I was like, what? It was like, you can look up now. It was like, and it was slow too. It was like 10 seconds. The elevator doors wouldn't close for a while. And then I was telling my friend, he's like, yes, the exact same thing happened to me with a different employee. Like, it was a female employee that helped me into the elevator. It was a male employee that helped him, but they did the exact same thing, and they like just bow. And it's just that they're so polite. Like, nobody seems to get angry with anybody. There was no yelling. It's very quiet. We were walking down a busy street, and when the car stopped at the traffic light, it was like pin drop silence, and there's like hundreds of people walking down the street. I was just like, where's all the noise? Everybody's just so calm. On the train, nobody's on their cell phone talking. Everybody's just quiet. It's a really like peaceful, calm, polite society. It's crazy.
Wow.
Very cool. Highly recommend visiting Japan, by the way.
Did they pick up trash from the floor?
That's on my list.
Yeah.
There's no trash on the floor.
That's what I heard.
And there's no garbage can. We were carrying around our own trash, and we're like, well, we can't. Obviously, we wouldn't throw it on the floor. Not here, we wouldn't either, right? But we're like, where's how is there no trash on the floor, and you can't find a garbage can? Where does all the garbage go? So you have to carry it with you until you find the one garbage can, like, that you managed to find after like 5 minutes of looking, and dump all your stuff in there. And then very, very clean, very polite, and the food's amazing. And technology's advanced. It's a cool place.
All right, we'll go next year with you, Harbir. You convinced us.
I don't know if I'm going next year, but I'll give you my itinerary so you can see what I did.
All right, sounds good.
We'll take it. You gave us a life itinerary for the next 10 years. You gave us a Japan itinerary. We appreciate your time and energy, man. And we're looking forward to having you back.
Yeah, man. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. I hope there was something useful in there.
We love talking to you.
So many
All
gems.
day. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could just
I
listen
love
to her
chatting with you
talk.
guys.
So many gems.
We love talking to you and learning
Thank
from
you
you.
guys. You guys are the best. You guys are the best. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's listening and put up with me. And if you're watching, my phone flipping and all of that stuff. So,
Harbir, before you go, tell them where they can find you. Tell them about everything you got going on right now.
Sure. Instagram usually is the easiest way to find me, at harbirsian.od. I have a podcast. It's called the 2020 Podcast. I would love for you to check that out. Those are sort of more, I don't know, entrepreneurial sort of growth mindset type conversations. Usually, it could be with optometrists. It could be with people from outside the industry, but I don't do it too much like clinical conversation. I do more of like the type of conversation we had today. But I like to ask, people from other industries those same kinds of questions and get their insights. So check that out. Instagram is at harbirsian.od, and then podcast is the 2020 Podcast on Apple, Spotify, on YouTube. Maybe easier to search my name. If you just search Harbir Sian on those channels, you'll find it.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the Depth Perception Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe on all of our platforms, including
Spotify,
Instagram,
Google Podcasts,
Apple Podcast.
YouTube. Make sure you click that button. Double tap that.
So you guys have no reason not to follow us and tune in to the next episode.
Stop wasting time.
Get in depth.
Subscribe.